Welcome back to Vetted VA Live. Every Tuesday, we get together here. We have realtor and mortgage expert moderators from the forums that gather here, and we go through a topic in a little bit greater detail. Here through the holidays, everyone's busy, so we're trying to keep the shows a little shorter, just kind of hit some bullet points. And tonight, we are going to cover an important topic. VA, with their appraisal process, has something called minimum property requirements. We're going to talk about what they are, why they're important, why they exist at all, and what to do if you have a property that is not meeting the minimum property requirements. So to go through this discussion, I've got three experts here with me. David Osborne with Logic Lending. Here he is in Granite Bay, California. Jason Corriere with Corriere Real Estate Group in Parker, Colorado. And Jason Sharon, another mortgage expert with us from South Carolina. So most importantly, if you're here and you're watching and you want us to answer any question, it does not have to be related to this topic. If you have anything housing, real estate related, VA specific, non-VA specific, jump in, post a question, and we will get to it as soon as we can. But with that, Jason Sharon, why don't you tell us what minimum property requirements are, why they're important, and why the VA even has them?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that if it's even non-VA related, because I'd want to start off that, hey, VA minimum property conditions are not unique. Every loan type has MPRs. Even conventional loans have MPRs. VA is just known as a myth to be tougher on them than others. FHA actually has more pages of MPRs in the FHA guidelines than VA.
And Jason, one of the things that's important, if you go back, we did a show on VA appraisals more than an hour earlier in the year. And you talked about myths of VA appraisals. People think, sellers and their realtors think that VA appraisals are incredibly difficult. If anything, we blow that myth up because it's the most flexible on every regard in terms of values, in terms of working with these minimum property requirements. So I didn't mean to cut you off. If you have questions about VA appraisals, go back and watch that recording because we did go way in depth in explaining why the VA appraisal process is the most friendly to the borrower, to the property, and to us as lending professionals.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up there, Josh, because that's the first point that we should probably make is these things are not set in stone, right? The MPRs are requirements that can be waived. So let's say you run into an issue, you're beating your head on the wall because the VA, the house doesn't meet the MPR requirements. The seller's being a jerk because the seller's not willing to go fix it. What do? The first option is you can go fix it yourself. You're allowed to spend money either through a contractor or do it yourself, obviously with the seller's permission, to go affect those repairs and then get a re-inspect. Or you can formally request through the regional loan center for your area a waiver for that MPR. And here's an example of an MPR waiver that I got on a deal, and anybody could. It's not like how special. Is I had a deal where it was a large piece of property and there's a dilapidated shed on it. And this shed is no value. This shed was an eyesore. This shed was a tetanus concern. I mean, this shed was crap. It was old wood. This shed was probably 100 years old. The seller didn't want to spend the money to knock it down. The buyer, who was very, very savvy, reached out to a wood reclamation company and said, hey, I've got these pictures of this shed. Would you buy it from me? And sure enough, this company was willing to pay him $2,000 for the right to go get that wood and then go repurpose that wood for benches, tables, whatever that foo-foo company did. So the appraisal comes in and says, hey, you got to tear the shed down before we close because it's a safety concern. Well, if we did that, that's going to cost the vet $2,000. That's not cool. So we actually submitted a formal request to the ROC with a quote from the company that was going to buy it, and the VA checked it off. Yep, you're good. Close that house. So just because you got the MPR doesn't mean you have to follow it. You can request a waiver. That's not always going to happen. I don't want to give you the hope of, oh, you've got a broken window, you're going to be able to get past it. But there is a formal process that no other loan type has. FHA doesn't have it, conventional doesn't have it, USDA doesn't have it. Only VA has the power, that flexibility, that the empowering of the veteran to be able to do stuff like that.
And I know we're talking about MPRs tonight, but we're just on the topic of the flexibility of VA appraisals. I had an appraisal last month that came in $115,000 low, $115,000 low. And we look at it, so this appraiser's nuts. So with VA, he can't just deliver us $115,000 low appraisal. He had to invoke Tidewater, which is warning us that he's not seeing the value, ask for additional information, and we gave him information. We gave him good supporting information, and he brought it up a tiny bit from what he had initially thought, but still $115,000 low. Did the same thing. We went back to the RLC. We asked for a reconsideration of value, and they came back, despite the fact that our appraisal said $715,000, they brought it up to $790,000. That additional $75,000, we didn't get the whole amount, but at the end of the day, in the current market, it got us close enough to close that deal. So that's just an example of the flexibility that we have with VA appraisals. Now, Jason, if I'm understanding you correctly, no one should freak out about MPRs or minimum property requirements because they are nothing special. They are simply telling us that we can't have any health and safety issues. They're going to put people at risk unnecessarily without having a plan for it. Because it sounds like in your situation, there was something there, but we had a plan to remediate and take care of it. And the RLC was totally cool with it. So pretty safe to say, and is that what you guys are seeing in your experience, that it's just the VA asking the appraiser to comment on anything with that property that may be health and safety related that would be of a concern to a veteran?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about protection, right? It's risk mitigation. It's risk mitigation for the veteran. It's risk mitigation for the lender. It's risk mitigation for the investor that buys that mortgage afterwards. Is there something with this property that can cause an issue post closing, and we want to make sure it's fixed ahead of time.
Perfect. Well, let's talk a little bit. We're all in different parts of the country. David, you're in Granite Bay. I'm here in Southern California. Similar state, but what are you seeing? What are the things that often come up with a VA loan or any other property type, but specifically with the VA loan that we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, for a VA loan, the biggest thing that I would say that the common misconception would be termites. And where I'd see a lot of problems still is that everybody thinks that for like an FHA mortgage, right, you would get a traditional termite report, which actually is going to be a lot more intensive than what the VA will actually accept, which is, let me bring that up so I don't butcher it. It's the MPMA, wood destroying insect inspection form. Why that's important is like a regular termite inspection report actually in California, and I can't speak to other parts of the country, but it's going to actually be going over dry rot is a common thing that can get pretty expensive, right? Whereas this form that's really used by, I'd say for VA purposes mainly, but is really concerned with if you're actually having a termite infection, right? Or beetles or something like that to that effect. And a lot of lenders have this common misconception that they can't use it. But I mean, we've used it quite a bit with a UWM, who's the number one lender in the nation. So they must be knowing what they're doing at the end of the day. So I'd say that's like the biggest thing. Another common thing is that, again, that I feel like Jason already kind of touched on this, is like the myth, right? Everybody has in their mind that it's just impossible to get over what the VA requires. And that's not true. There's so much flexibility. The VA really is, their main concern is protecting the veteran at the end of the day. That's like their main focus, just like kind of our group as well, right? So we just have to make sure that we're actually educating. And what that means, I'd say, is you want to make sure you're working with a professional, not just on the loan side, but working with a realtor that is well-versed with VA, so they can actually help really overcome any objections that the listing agent might have. Or even I've talked to sellers directly to advocate for my clients at the same time to be able to get their offer accepted.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the form that you're talking about, the difference there between your standard termite report is it's going to call out things including wood rot, wood damage above and beyond what is an active infestation. And right. The VA is accepting a form that's basically saying, is there an active infestation? They're not concerning themselves with other issues with the wood around the house or the structure of the house, unless it were to be a health and safety issue that the appraiser might comment on above and beyond that.
Exactly.
So the caveat to throw in there, wood is awesome information, and it's going to be state specific. So like I'm licensed in 7 states. In South Carolina, I can't get away with the NFPA 33A. In Georgia, I can. So it really depends on the state. So the the real estate laws in that state are going to matter. So like for us, it's called a CO 100. Don't worry about the numbers. And it's anything that is a leading indicator to termite infestation. So think like a termite. The termite wants water. That's the whole function of the termite. Eating wood is to find moisture. So like for us, moisture levels in the crawl space are a dead stop on here in Charleston. If your moisture level is above 20%, and they'll get up and measure in the corner of the crawl space to where there's no ventilation. So sometimes you got to install dehumidifiers. Sometimes you got to increase the square inches of vent ducts in your crawl space. So it really is state by state specific. But if you're living in the South, it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to get termites. If you take nothing else from this, get a termite bond on every single property you own. Otherwise, your bugs are going to eat you out of house and home.
Well, why don't you go and expand on that? What is that? What is a termite bond?
So a termite bond is where you pay, and it's not cheap. It's normally several $1,000s. It's basically it's an insurance policy, one-time purchase, with a annual renewal for an inspection, to where if you get termites because of the bond company did not adequately protect your house, then you will be reimbursed X number of dollars for termite repair. So let's say the termites get in, and it could be as simple as a bush. So let's say you've got, normally if you get a termite bond, you've got a barrier of protection in the ground of termite bait and poison. So the termites are going to go find that bait, they're going to eat the bait, and they're going to die. But let's say you've got a tree that comes up and then branches off to your house, and the termites go up that tree and get to your house, thereby by bypassing that protective, perimeter of poison around your house. Now those termites can get in your house. They're going to eat the wood. That happens. I've had termites in multiple houses. It sucks, but you deal with it. You can move on. That bond is going to pay you for the repairs to get your house back in a safe and stable condition. And whenever you get a termite bond, normally you're going to have a yearly reinspection where they're going to come out and they're going to refresh the poison. They're going to check to make sure that you don't have trees touching your property, bypassing the perimeter, all that kind of stuff, to make sure that you're good. And you're going to say, hey, your wood is rotten. So why is wood rot a concern? So let's say here in the South, it's very typical to have a garage door on the back of your house. And normally the builders don't do a good job with the gutter or the rain diverter or whatever. So you got rain falling and hitting that little 3 foot by 3 foot concrete pad on the back of your house by your garage door. So it hits that, the water splashes up on your frame. And over time, that splash eventually penetrates the wood. Now there's water in the wood, starts wood rot. And that soft rotted wood is like termite, it's like termite catnip. The termites are going to love that. So that's why that type of stuff is important to eradicate early, or to replace early, because termites are going to go to there first. When it's softer, it's easier, and it's full of the water they want.
Perfect. So we've got the perspective here from both coasts. We've got California, we've got South Carolina. Jason Corriere, in Colorado, you're going to be the voice of Middle America for us. What types of issues do you see as an agent, either listing or representing a buyer with MPRs? What are some of the issues that are coming up that you're seeing?
Probably typical, same things that they see also. Termites aren't a big issue here. The altitude, and it's very dry climate, so that's not a major concern. I mean, we have seen them, but it's rare. I would say, as an example, we just did. I did a deal with a vetted VA member lender here in Colorado, Nathan Eichhorn, and we encountered a mold in the crawl space with our veteran client, and that was it had to be mitigated. Obviously, there was an HOA, and so we had to contend with the HOA covering it, because all of these. It was actually an interesting dilemma, because these townhomes were they were burned down through a fire. and the fire department came in and they flooded the one unit that started burning, and then they were able to contain the flames there, and then that unit was burned. I think another couple adjacent units were marginally burned, but the issue was in the unit that our client was purchasing was actually probably 3 or 4 doors down, and all the water from the fire hoses leaked down under the crawl spaces of those other units and then migrated downhill. And so there was no indication when they had rebuilt the units that were affected by the fire, and because they gutted them and rebuilt them completely, but there was no indication that there was any water. Well, the HOA, we had to contact the HOA and then have them agree to the mitigation, which they did. And we had to have the appraiser come out, I think, again, and verify that that vapor barrier had been installed properly in that crawl space. I mean, in mold, Jason, Sharon, and David, I'm sure you guys understand too. In those climates, mold it loves black, dark spaces and water. Mold needs water, and the reason that, and it was actually a good. I'm glad that this MPR happened for the client, because it's an opportunity to make sure that things were done properly. Actually, the reason that the reason that um, the mold was still prevalent was because there was an active water leak from a pipe. So it had started with the fire and the mitigation, and then there was a dripping pipe and another unit adjacent to this unit, 5 doors. That was actually 6 doors down. And when we conducted the inspection and went through this thorough inspection phase for our client, which obviously the number one objective, obviously, is to protect the veteran, right? And so we did a thorough inspection, and it unveiled not only the original issue, but an ancillary issue that was mitigated. And then that owner was actually, the HOA had to mitigate that with vapor barrier and fans and dry it out, and then add, like Jason was saying earlier, proper ventilation to mitigate that unit too. So it's always about doing the right thing by everybody involved, protecting the veteran. Those inspections are crucial. And an inspection and unveils, everything from cracked concrete to, a deck without a railing that's above 30 inches of code, or, whatever that is, cracked panes in window glass, other things. But, mold's obviously a big one. But, that's what that's designed to do, is to protect the vet.
So, so far, what have we talked about? We've talked about wood destroying pests, termites specifically. We've talked about mold. Everything that we're going to go through tonight, to get back to one of Jason Sharon's original points here, is we call them minimum property requirements. They fall in the handbook under minimum property requirements, but these aren't unique to VA. Any of these are going to be a problem if they're uncovered, either an inspection or an appraisal. So with that, why don't we talk a little bit about the difference between the inspection and the appraisal? Because many of these things, if you look, an appraiser is not an actual home inspector. They're not going through and checking in the same way that the inspector does. But the report that goes into our file on the loan side is the actual appraisal. Jason, David, where is the crossover there with something that might come up on an inspection? And does the VA and your lender get concerned with any issues that are on the inspection, or are they really just looking and focusing on what the appraiser calls out and sees on the actual appraisal report?
Do you want
Jason C is probably the best one to answer that, being the realtor on this.
As far as the appraisal, I mean, the bottom line is whatever is called out on the appraisal, you've got to get the appraiser comfortable with whatever that repair is. Whatever, if it's a repair, or if it's, mitigation, or whatever that is, it's got to be corrected. I like Jason's example earlier about the shed, that outbuilding. That's a really unique workaround. obviously, like he said, it's not something that people are going to encounter frequently, but especially in like a PUD or, a track home or something like that. But, you've always got to do whatever you got to do. I think ultimately when it comes to an MPR, to make sure that that property is appraised properly and delivered properly and safe for the veteran.
So
And
we
can
do
I?
have, yeah, absolutely, David.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is, so lenders, we're concerned, we're going to follow what's on the contract, right? The residential purchase agreement. So on a VA, that means not only are we going to take into consideration the appraisal, but we have to take in consideration the termite report. Then on the flip side, you might be working with your realtor on getting a home inspection or a pool inspection or a roof inspection. And really, those are, an appraiser has a head and shoulders approach to things. What does that mean? That means they're not going to be walking around they're going to check like the I was about to say chicken. Wow, kitchen and bathroom. The kitchen and bathroom to make sure that they have grounded outlets to meet code and things like that. But they are not going to be, well, most of the time, 90+% of the time, they are not going to be peeping their head in an attic where they could actually see if there's an active sunlight coming through, which means what? Probably a roof leak, right? Or if there is a crawl space. I don't know too many appraisers that are actually going to go underneath the home and inspect it, So whereas a home inspection, they have to get dirty, is the best way to put it. And I like to explain it to clients of like a home inspection or inspector is like an actual mechanic that is going to be checking out the engine of your house, which is going to be, I say like the electrical, because if that doesn't work, it goes out. You can't start anything up, right? And then they're going to be checking the heating and everything like that. So it's so much more detailed when what you work with on with your realtor versus what the lender is going to require. Because again, we are just following the contract. So, and there's very few times that we're actually going to see those home inspections or roof inspections, unless your realtor is wanting us to advocate with a difficult seller. But again, like all things, you got to proceed with caution, right? And it needs to make sense before you involve your lender on that type of things. So, because we do have to, once we have knowledge of it, we do have to disclose it.
I think
Right.
that's a great point, that you don't want to, as a realtor, I don't, you give the lender the amend of the credit, whatever that, right? So you're not showing them the whole inspection report, but it's our job as a realtor to make sure that we protect them. The appraiser could come in and call something out that needs to be repaired, but it might be one of 5 things that we're trying to get them to do.
And in practice, what's most likely to happen, think in terms of an appraiser. Appraiser, depending on the size of the property, if it's a huge property or a rural property with lots of land, they could be there longer, but plus or minus an hour tops are they at the property. Home inspectors, they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, again, depending on the size of the property and number of outbuildings. They're doing very different inspections. The appraiser is there. They want to know bed and bath count, square footage, so that they know that the comparable sales that they're comparing for valuation are accurate comps. They are doing a visual inspection. So where's the crossover? We're talking about the inspection doesn't come into your loan file unless a realtor for some reason would like it to be, would like to help leverage with a seller. But where it can come in is an appraiser sees something and they're not a roof expert. Something doesn't look right to them. They're going to say, this doesn't look right. We would like a roof inspection. So now we have to have a report that a licensed roofer does say there is or is not an issue with the roof based on the appraiser's visual inspection. It could be the same thing if they witness mold somewhere in the property. They say, hey, that doesn't look right to me. I would like an expert to come in and talk about it. So those are the big things. And sort of on that topic of inspections, we do have a question here. Realtor preferred inspectors or buyer's choice? So does the buyer pick the inspector, or Jason, do you as the realtor generally pick that? I know the answer, but why don't you walk through for the viewers at home how we get to the inspector that's going to come out and check out the home?
Sometimes a buyer has an inspector they've used in the past that they prefer using. I try to give at least 2 names of property inspectors, and I give them, a resume for each, and ask and tell them that, they can in the interview each and then choose who they want. If they want a recommendation from me further, then I'll provide that. When it comes to inspections too, I think it's important to note that, again, it's designed to protect the client. And clients sometimes have a tendency, especially when it's a seller's market, buyers have a tendency to kind of be, they are already beat up through a multiple offer situation. The sellers have already told them they're not going to do anything at inspection, or they've conveyed that through their realtor to the buyer's broker. But it's important to get a real clear look at that. And so I always encourage my clients to, I'll introduce them to a couple that I trust, I've been working with for 15 plus years. And, but not only just the general home property inspection, but also the sewer scope, even on a new build, a sewer scope, a radon test. So I've had clients that they wanted to perform a lead-based paint test. So you're buying, I always defer to, they're spending more money than they could for any other purchase in their lifetime. It may be the fifth time that they bought a house, but it's as a percentage of what they're paying for that property, I always want a thorough examination of exactly what it is they're buying. Because the second that somebody says, we don't need to do a sewer scope because the property was built in 2018 and it's all ABS. Well, that's they come back to 6 months later and they say, well, there's a belly in the front yard because they didn't tamp it right when they built it, and now we've got, it's holding water, 6 foot section holding an inch of water. So that's where I always try to recommend more than one, tell them what their credentials are, and then recommend that they do everything available that is in their that they offer, the inspector offers, to get a real thorough look at the property.
It's a great answer. And we have a follow-up question here. So really just piggybacks off that. How should buyers PCSing or not from the area find a home inspector outside of the agent's recommendations? So here's the thing. I totally understand a buyer saying, well, I want someone independent. I would want to make sure that the realtor isn't just sending me a company that's going to co-sign, hey, it's a great house, and not cause any waves in their transaction. But what I would say most importantly, hopefully you are working with a realtor that you have all the faith in the world, that if they refer you 2 or 3 inspectors to choose from, that you can vet them, do your research, look at the reviews online, see how long they've been in business, check their licensing, check with the contractors board, whoever does their licensing. But if you really don't have a comfort level with a recommendation from your agent, I would question your relationship with that agent, because you should have a pretty solid relationship and belief in them.
Let me play devil's advocate. Let me play devil's advocate with that with you, Josh. So let's say Chris Griffith is a buyer. Do you think he's going to believe anything his agent says? No, he's going to go vet a VA, whatever recommendation he makes. So I totally get the question. Yeah,
but 100%, Jason. But I'm just saying, by all means, do your vetting. But why would I want to go start from scratch when I have someone that I supposedly trust who's going to give me a handful of people that have already been, pre-vetted and down to narrowing the field? Because what I can say is I've had buyers before that I'm going to go find my own inspector. And it's some of the worst inspections that I've ever seen. And it was probably just dumb luck, but you randomly going online and looking up home inspectors, what the guy ended up going, well, they've got a guarantee and they do this and they give me a free termite inspection. You're like, termite inspections aren't something you're going to pay for anyways. They just offer to give you something that's essentially of no value, because anyone that can do a termite inspection will generally give you the inspection report wanting to get the remediation work if there is any. So it's not to say that you shouldn't go out and find your own, but really, what are the tools available to you if you're going to go do that? You're going to Google them, and you're going to do the same vetting that you would or should do to whoever is referred to you by a friend, family, realtor, whoever that is.
And if Josh, I can piggyback on that, I would just say, I would tell the client, that's totally fine. If you want to go out and find a home inspector, then I'm going to interview them for you also. Ooh. And I'm going to try to find out how knowledgeable they are, how many inspections have they performed? What other agents in our community have they worked for? Do I know those agents? I mean, I would put it back on the client and say, I'm happy to, I believe and trust that I'm only as good as the people that I refer to you who represent me. So I always very careful about who I refer out, because that's my reputation on the line. And so if you want to bring somebody in that I haven't vetted myself, then understand that we're going to go through a vetting process from my end also.
Dude, that is so money, man. I love that. I mean, as you recognize, I mean, as we all recognize, the agent's job, once the contract's signed, right, the agent's job shifts completely, right? It goes from hunter, right, following the house, showing the house, doing the due diligence of the house, to risk mitigation, right? The Jason C's job, once the contract is signed, is keeping the deal, right? It's making sure that the title company is doing the job, making sure the lender is doing the job, making sure the inspector is doing the job, making sure the appraiser is doing their job, making sure the insurance agent is doing the job, right? So Jason, at that point, has all the responsibility but none of the authority. But his job is risk mitigation, to keep that deal together for the borrower, unless the borrower decides to walk. So that answer from Jason C is so spot on, man. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's clutch.
Yeah.
Sure.
And also, to add one thing to that is, what our ultimate job as the realtor is to protect the buyer's earnest money, period. That's through the real estate commission. And so if you're passing deadlines, or, your lender's passing a, loan commitment deadline, or, whatever the terminology is for the contract in your state, that deadline or appraisal deadline.
Oh.
Did we lose him?
Hopefully he didn't drive into a ditch, but we did lose him.
So David Osborne said something earlier that gave me two thoughts. I really, really liked what he said. How I explain the inspection versus appraisal is there's a form for VA that the veteran, the borrower, has to sign, that he or she recognizes that the appraisal is not an inspection to get an inspection, right? That's a standard form on every VA deal that they've got to sign. Two is the appraisal. The appraiser David's talking about attic. It's a head and shoulders inspection of the attic and head and shoulders inspection of the crawl space, right? So literally, that's as much of the inspection that the appraiser has to do of the attic or the crawl space. They're not getting there, they're not getting dirty, they're not wearing coveralls, they're not wearing dicky coveralls to go do they can show up in khakis and a tie, right? How I like to explain it to clients and realtors is, when you're doing the walkthrough, I want you to be in the mindset of, would you be okay with a little kid, not that you'd ever do it, but a toddler running around unsupervised in the house? Is the toddler going to get hurt? No broken windows, no busted drywall, no open-ended pipes, no exposed electrical, no active roof leaks, floor-to-floor covering, no trip hazards, no fall hazards, that type of stuff. And I actually tell them, I said, hey, I want you to go get an ice. Whenever you're going to look at this property, I want you to go to the freezer, get an ice cube out of the freezer. One, electricity's working. Two, water's working. I want you to put the ice cube on every window that you go through the house. The window's going to fog up, right? You're going to have condensation on the window. Can you wipe the condensation off? You're good. The window seal is good. If you can't wipe the condensation off, the condensation is on the inside, that seal's busted, that window's not going to pass a VA appraisal. We see a lot of busted window seals here. David and Jason C probably see it as well, but that's probably the second most common MPR violation or MPR issue we run into, is a busted seal on a window.
I was going to say your clients are upscale and fancy, Jason, because apparently all the houses they're looking at have ice makers. I mean, that's some fancy stuff.
You're in California, really?
We don't have stuff like that. It's your basic old refrigerator. You're lucky if you could have the trays to make ice cubes. We actually have a good question here, a realtor-related question. And it says, unrelated question, but want a real estate opinion. Listing agent refuses to accept a veteran's offer due to 100% financing. What recourse we have? Jason C., before you jump in and answer that, we did an episode probably 6 months ago about how to maximize the odds of getting a VA offer accepted. The market was much different then. It's a little tamer now, a little bit easier to get that offer accepted, but everything in there still applies. Your realtor and your loan officer should be putting an educational clinic on for the listing agent and the seller to help them understand why they should be accepting a VA offer. But the specific question here, Jason, is what recourse do we have if a seller just refuses to, or is there any recourse if a seller refuses to entertain a veteran's offer?
I'm going to interject before Jason C answers. The first thing you do is punch that listing agent in the throat. Right, Jason. So step 2 is Jason C is going to answer step 2.
Well, the bottom line is it's not the listing agent who's refusing anything; it's the seller.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
So the fact is, the listing broker has to present whatever is presented by through the real estate commission. They must present all offers. So to answer the question, if the listing agent's refusing, then they're in violation and can be reported to the real estate commission, number one. But number two, if it's the seller, if we rephrase the question and say, did the seller refuse to accept the veteran's offer? Well, that's a rabbit hole, because who knows? Are there multiple offers? Is there an offer that's a cash offer that's closing in a week, or is it no appraisal? I don't know. There's a lot kind of there. But just to answer the question on the surface level, is the agent has to prepare present all offers. And also, I think Jason is spot on. It's our job to educate people about the VA loan and what an amazing product it is. It's a great product for veterans, and they're not harder to close than a conventional loan, or FHA sometimes is more difficult to close than a VA loan. So I feel like it's our job to educate that listing broker. Hopefully you're getting an opportunity to work with a listing broker who has some experience, and you don't even have to. But
and
so
I would like to add on to that. Is that all right?
Go for it.
I would say sometimes it really honestly comes down to educating the seller, because let's face it, some listing agents they don't know what they don't know at the end of the day, right? They follow all these myths, and I've found out, and I started doing this pretty regularly like a couple of years ago. And it's all about how you present it to guys. Like, you're going to only get so far, in any type of market. So the more honey we can provide versus vinegar, the better, right? So, but I've talked with at least a dozen over the past 2 years to advocate. Did that mean every offer got accepted? No, but it was educational at the end of the day. And actually, one of the sellers who was moving to Tennessee was like, you know what? You just convinced me that I need to use my VA home loan benefit. And I'm like, dude, come on. That was a huge win. So, if you're not doing that, I would just do it. And you have to build a little bit of rapport with the listing agent before you throw that out, right? So, otherwise it doesn't go over well. I'm speaking from experience. But I think that's what we have to do, is just go that one step extra and just give it one more try to be able to try to win over not only the listing agent, but sometimes it literally comes down to winning over the seller, and they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, we've got, that's the mission of VA is education, and it's changing hearts and minds one person at a time. So you're exactly right, David. It's incumbent upon us to do that. Now, to go back to the original question, how do you tackle that? The answer to the question, to add on to what Jason C said, is picking the right professionals that have the knowledge and the reputation to teach that to the listing agent. So it's, for me, what I do is I've got a video on YouTube that is all the strengths of why a VA loan is better. And that Zoom call that you're talking about, the thing that we did, Josh, 6 months ago, I was on that when we did that. I send that link. If I run into this trouble, I obviously have a empathetic and curious phone call with a listing agent, so that way you don't come across like a dick like I do a lot of times. Sorry, I cussed on this. I don't come across like a jerk.
You're not going to get invited back, Jason. If the big boss hears, you're in big trouble.
So I actually had that phone call with the listing agent. I offered to have the phone call with the seller, and I've had many phone calls with sellers, like David talked about, because you can win the hearts and mind of that seller as well. And then you share that data, that information via whatever medium you want to use. I send a YouTube link, because the veterans, and I'm a veteran as well. We need, there's a stigma in the nation about VA loans, and we need the best team backing us, fighting for us that we can get, and that's what VA provides.
And it's funny. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the VA loan is legitimately the most flexible, both in terms of guidelines, appraisals, all of these things, the minimum property requirements that we're talking about tonight. And there still is a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and misunderstanding on the part of sellers. They think that they are less likely to get to the finish line, because the bottom line is, what does a seller want? They want to sell their home for the highest net. So meaning that they walk away from escrow with the biggest check possible and in the timeline that they agreed to. And for whatever reason, some sellers think that a VA loan is not going to get them that, when the actual fact of the matter is it is the most likely to get them there. I mean, I guess maybe you could say a cash offer that doesn't require an appraisal and doesn't require any bank approval. Someone can write a check in 3 days for your house. That's probably the shortest, most guaranteed path to walking away from escrow with the check that you want. But short of that, VA is literally the most flexible. So we're preaching to the choir here. You guys are veterans and wanting questions or having questions about that. And we're here, we're all on the same team, but it truly is a great program. And if not the best benefit a veteran has, one of the best benefits that veterans have earned and are entitled to. Wanted to post another comment here. We had a realtor make a comment there in Minnesota. Find many out-of-state LOs requesting a termite report for VA financing. I share with them the section from the lender guide showing termite map and have got them to waive the requirement. So I'm in a state where we do have to have them, but let's hear. I'm going to just share my screen and we'll pull this map up so you can see exactly what they're talking about. Here's the fancy little map. All of these states in blue, you are required. The states in lighter blue, what does it say? I think it's county by county, depends on the county. But all those gray states up there where it's cold and termites don't want to live, you are not required to have the termite report and clearance in your file. So it's important that your realtor, your lender know the guidelines and can push back when you're getting things. And misunderstandings and misinformation or not knowing this are some of the reasons why people don't want to accept VA offers. They think they're going to have problems when nothing could be further from the truth. So with that, we've been going here for about 45 minutes on the topic. We promised to keep it a little bit short here during the holidays. Why don't we go around the horn with any closing thoughts on MPRs, VA loans, the holiday season, whatever's on you guys' mind. David, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, what I would end off by saying is, like, if something doesn't sound right, lean on this group. You can reach out to professionals on the map to be able to reach out to someone local, or just post a comment question. We're more than happy to jump in. And at the end of the day, whether we're doing the loan or representing you on the real estate side, that's not our mission. We're here to help you guys get home at the end of the day. So lean into us. Even if you think it doesn't even necessarily relate, we're here to help. So
absolutely. Jason C., how about yourself?
I just want to thank all the veterans for their service, and especially here during the holidays when you're away from your families and active duty, and also just let you know that I think I really like what David said about our goals to bring you home, and make sure that everybody knows that we're a resource to anybody in the military, either active or has served, and God bless and Merry Christmas.
Amen,
all right, Jason, Sharon, we're leaving the last word for you tonight.
So David Osborne stole my thunder. So what I would say is, let me add 2 points, I guess, to that we probably could have covered, and we wouldn't have covered, but David stole my thunder. So one is if it fails, MPRs, you got to get them either if you can't get them waived, you got to get them fixed. You have to get a reinspect. Now, most lenders are going to default. This goes along with the comment we just had of lenders just not understanding. Most lenders are going to default to I've got to get a reinspect of that item fixed. The only required repair that actually requires an appraiser to go out to the property is fixing flaking lead-based paint. If it's not lead-based paint that's flaking and it's an MPR hit and it gets fixed, the lender can accept an invoice to clear that. Now, they're not going to do that, but they can. The other part that I would say is escrow holdback. So let's say it fails MPR and the seller doesn't have the funds to pay it. The seller agrees to pay for it, but doesn't have the funds to pay it. Some lenders will agree to an escrow holdback for the repairs. Not every lender will do it, so don't go get excited and punch your mortgage guy in the face if they're not doing it. But the seller can put money in escrow at closing. You close, you move in the house, the money gets paid to a contractor from the proceeds of the seller, and then the appraiser goes back out there and inspects that the thing was done. So those are 2 points that we probably could have covered a little bit more, but I think we had a great conversation. But there's 2 things that options out there that veterans should know they have on a VNO.
That's why we had you here tonight, Jason, to keep us on track and cover all of dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So we're getting towards the end of the year. Appreciate you guys being here through the holidays. Appreciate you watching the other episodes. Like I said, we've now had 2 episodes here where we've had a good number of questions. And really, that was our hope in starting the live. It's not just for us to cover a topic in great detail. It is helpful sometimes with video and hearing people talk it through versus just the written content in the forums. But if you show up, we're here every Tuesday, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, and then you got to do the math if you're in between any of those 2 time zones. But we're here. Definitely want to answer your questions live. If we sat here for an hour and just answered live questions, that would be ideal versus going over a topic. So appreciate you being here tonight. Appreciate the 3 of you being here tonight. Appreciate you being members and sharing your expertise with all of the veterans. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.